Okay, guys, special surprise for you all. Those of you that saw my poll on my Twitter page, and to those of you that voted on it, and again, thanks to those that did, you probably saw that the winning match on the poll, which was for my classic match review, and you got to select from classic WCW Cruiserweight matches, which I thought was appropriate given that the WWE just recently brought back the Cruiserweight division. So it seemed appropriate for me to go back and revisit WCW's classic take on the Cruiserweights, sorry. And the winner of that poll was Dean Malenko versus Chris Jericho from Uncensored 1998. And special little addition to that, I am going to be reviewing that match, but I had so much fun going back and rewatching that match and the Malenko-Jericho feud in general that I decided, fuck it, I will review all three of their major pay-per-view encounters. Just to highlight some of the things that I'm looking for in a feud, why I enjoyed this feud, and talk about what WWE should probably consider doing in implementing their own Cruiserweight division, and any division in general. It doesn't have to... what I'm about to say can be applied to any division. It doesn't have to be just the Cruiserweights. And there are a lot of naysayers going on the internet now after 2 weeks that the Cruiserweight division has failed already. And to that I say, guys, it's been 2 weeks. Let's calm down. I do think that there are some things they need to start doing, which is building characters and start building feuds. Right now, the only thing they've really done is turn Brian Kendrick heel, which is good, but they need to do more things like that. And because you really do need story and character, even in a division that's centered around action and flips and dives and all sorts of other stuff. You still need that character, you still need those stories, and you still need proper context to give fans a reason to care, because if it's nothing but flip-flops and action, then there's nothing of substance there. Any match can have flip-flops in it. I mean, main events have flip-flops in it. So what makes the Cruiserweight so special? Well, if you look at the Cruiserweight Classic, I thought WWE did a really good job of bringing everybody up to speed on who these guys are, what their backstory is, and why you should care about them, so that when you get to the matches in the tournament, you've pretty much already picked out who you're going to root for, and then you just react accordingly. And the action's really just, or any spot that you do is really just a tool. And in the Cruiserweight's case, it's kind of what gives them their identity, but you still need to have a proper context to everything. You still need to have characters. You still need to have stories. Case in point, WCW's Chris Jericho and Dean Malenko feud for the Cruiserweight Championship in 1998, which was a masterful display of a strong heel, a strong face, Chris Jericho really coming out of his shell and just coming to life as a character. I mean, this was where the greatness of Chris Jericho really started to shine through. It started when he won the Cruiserweight title for the third time, I believe it was. He won it from Rey Mysterio Jr. It sold out, and then attacked Rey and injured him post-match and put Rey on the shelf for about 6 months. And the resulting character change for Jericho led to him becoming a bit of an obnoxious twerp, kind of a coward. He did not want to face Dean Malenko. And because Dean Malenko was obviously his greatest threat. And Dean Malenko, I'll say it right here, him and Chris Jericho are probably the two greatest Cruiserweight champions that WCW ever had, for different reasons. Jericho had the character, and I'll explain more as I get into the storyline. But as far, Dean was the guy that you thought of as having the best matches. I mean, he could go out there with Ray or Jericho or Eddie or anybody else that you could think of and have a great match with him. So Dean's whole selling point was wrestling, and great wrestling. And he was a great technical wizard and everything. Not always the greatest personality, but the guy could make just about anybody in the ring look good and just typically had awesome matches. So putting somebody like Jericho, who was really starting to bud as a character, with somebody like Dean was a really good move. Dean was sold as the Iceman. Again, no emotion. So throughout the course of the feud, you had a guy who could get under anybody's skin, who was this obnoxious little piece of shit that could enrage Dean Malenko and bring some of that passion out of him. Not just, there's more to him than just being a technical wizard. Of like, you piss off Dean Malenko, he'll kick your ass. And that was what Chris Jericho brought out in Dean. And Dean gave Jericho this nice security blanket because all the matches were going to be good because you're working with Dean. So it's, they really complemented each other very, very well. And, in the early portions of the feud, it was centered around Jericho not wanting to face Dean, but constantly taunting him. And again, kind of the sense of humor that Jericho would have. Dean Malenko was sold as the man of 1,000 holds. Well, Jericho would go out there and say, I have 1,004 holds. Why 1,004? Because it's slightly more than 1,000, and that's just a random number that Jericho could be a dick with. And they got a lot of great stuff out of that. Actually, after Uncensored, when Jericho continued to taunt Dean Malenko, you had that classic segment where he started reading off the 1,004 holds that he had, and some of the names of those holds were great. Of course, every other one was some kind of version of an arm bar, which was great. Actually, the one that made me laugh the most was actually the first two on the list, and it just cracked me up when, again, especially going back and rewatching it. Move number 1, arm drag. Move number 2, arm bar. And I don't know why, but Jericho's inflection on that just cracked me up to holy hell, to where I missed probably the next 3 or 4 moves. But again, the sense of humor that Jericho brought to it was great, and the character development out of him was great too. But going back to the Uncensored match, this was their first major pay-per-view outing, and it was a pretty good match. It had the technical wizardry that you would expect, but you would always have those moments in Jericho-Dean matches where Dean would finally have enough of Jericho and would just start wailing on him, like either with headbutts or a flurry of punches or whatever, and the crowd would always go crazy because that's what you want to see. You want to have a heel that the fans want to see get his ass kicked. And that's the chemistry that these two had. And it made their matches a lot more exciting and a lot more interesting when you had that element to it. And, of course, the action was great, too. A lot of the counters they had were great. In 2 of the matches, they did that spot where Jericho was going for a top rope Hurricane Rana or a Frankenstein or whatever you want to call it. And Dean countered it into a gutbuster off the top. And then you get to the 3rd match at Great American Bash. Great American Bash. And they actually did the opposite, where Dean was going for the top rope gutbuster, then Jericho countered it into the top rope Hurricane Rana. So little touches like that are nice. But going back to the Uncensored match, it ultimately concluded with Jericho defeating Dean with the Lion Tamer, not the Walls of Jericho, the Lion Tamer. And his sick version of the Boston Crab that just looks so nasty. That's why when he went to WWE and started using the Walls of Jericho and it was basically just a Boston Crab, I was like, no, let's get the Lion Tamer. So now whenever he breaks out the Lion Tamer, I just pop out because that move looks way sicker. But, I thought the Uncensored match was good, and much to my surprise, Jericho went over. I mean, normally in situations like that, you expect, okay, he's been an obnoxious prick to the babyface, so babyface is going to give him his comeuppance, and it didn't happen at this match. So it was really a nice little surprise that Jericho's run got to continue, and now that he holds the victory over Dean under his belt, now he's even more obnoxious. Dean went away for a little bit after this and was off TV, and Jericho basically carried the build-up to the next match all by himself. And that's when he did the 1,004 holds and reading the list thing and started making fun of Malenko's dead father and started making fun of Malenko's family and doing everything he could to mock him and all the stuff that they did. And Jericho was just an obnoxious prick the entire time, to where it's like, God damn it, will somebody just punch this motherfucker right in the face? And that leads into Slamboree 1998, where Jericho was going to defend the Cruiserweight Championship against the winner of a 15-man battle royal. Some of the Cruiserweights involved, I don't remember all of them, but Billy Kidman was in there, Juventud Guerrera was in there, names that you would expect, especially 1998 Cruiserweight division. Those are some of the top Cruiserweights they had at the time. A few other ones, El Dandy, Volano 4, I think, was in there. Silver Cane was in there. A lot of the lower end guys. Marty Jannetty was in there, which is always good to see Marty. But the best part of the whole thing, the Battle Royal itself, except for the ending, which I'll get into that, but the best part of the Battle Royal were Jericho's introductions of each competitor. He actually introduced all 15 men as he entered the ring and mocked them while he did so, which in typically great Jericho fashion. And again, building that heat and making him even more obnoxious. And then you get to the final two in the Battle Royal. It's Juventud Guerrera and Cyclope. And Juventud eliminates himself on purpose, allowing Cyclope to go face Jericho. And I was like, that's interesting. Why would he do that? Because as a kid, I was like, why did Juvi just lose on purpose? And then Cyclope takes his mask off, and it's Dean fucking Malenko. And the crowd erupted. Because Dean had been gone for a while, and Jericho had just been mocking him the entire time. And those are those type of moments that you really want to strive for. When the heel is allowed to build his heat, and he's not getting humiliated every week, and he's allowed to be an obnoxious prick, and he gets away with being an obnoxious prick. You get those moments where the faces come back, and now it's like, okay, now he's going to get him. And if I had to compare it to something, this is the Cruiserweight version of Sting coming back and fighting the NWO at Uncensored 97, the year before. And just that great feeling of like, oh my God, here it comes. He's finally going to kick his ass. And that crowd erupted for Dean. And again, it's those type of things. When you establish a heel that fans want to see get their ass kicked and is just really obnoxious and never getting his comeuppance, you set up a situation where it looks like he's going to get his comeuppance, and it's great. And that really added a lot of energy to their immediate title match right after the Battle Royal, and made for very memorable stuff, and just a really well-executed moment all around. It really captured all the great things that a great payoff to a feud should. Dean Malenko ultimately won this match with the Texas Cloverleaf. Now, by this point, Jericho's already beaten him with the Lion Tamer, and then Dean's beaten him with the Texas Cloverleaf. So, in their next match, they're going in with two very dangerous submission holds. Again, very important. And Dean walked out of this pay-per-view Cruiserweight champion. Now, one thing that I also liked about this feud, each match causes a development. The first match resulted in Jericho being even more obnoxious and Dean going away for a while. The second match resulted in a great change for Jericho's character, the conspiracy theorist. He went out every week and said that I am a victim of this conspiracy. There was even the bit where he read a letter from Ted Turner, and he voiced his complaints to everybody and anybody that would listen. He was walking around with a sign that said conspiracy victim. The reason for him feeling this way was that Dean Malenko was not an official participant in the Battle Royal. His name was not on the official list, so he felt like Dean Malenko shouldn't be the true Cruiserweight champion, and that he got screwed. The end result to this was that Dean was ultimately stripped of the Cruiserweight title, the championship was vacated, and then these two would face each other again at the Great American Bash 1998, with the winner becoming the true Cruiserweight champion. So this was kind of their big burn-off match. And not necessarily the end of the feud, but the last major pay-per-view encounter that they had together. And it was a very good match. Again, he had the emotional charge because of all the build-up that had gone into it before. Every time Dean Malenko just flipped out and just beat that, throw wrestling out the rule book and out the window and would just beat the crap out of Jericho, it got major pops from the crowd because that's what you want to see. I'm not saying technical wrestling is boring. It's not. I'm just saying that when you've established a prick like Jericho and you have a babyface that wants to rip his head off, that's the type of stuff that fans want to see. They want to see the babyface rip his head off. And really added a lot to this match. Again, very good match. Action-packed match. A lot of the counters to the submission holds, again, because both holds were considered very deadly by this point. A lot of the counters were very, very cool and made for a very exciting closing sequence. The closing sequence to pretty much all their matches were very good. And ultimately, this match ended when Jericho got in Dean's face and told him, "You're nothing just like your dead father," and Dean went ballistic. Tacked Jericho with a steel chair, chased him to the backstage area, and even chased him into traffic. Right outside the arena. The match was actually in Baltimore. Wonder why I didn't go to that show. That would have been a fun one to attend. But, so the match ended in a disqualification. It was ultimately decided that Chris Jericho won by disqualification. and was now the Cruiserweight champion. Now, some people would probably complain about that, but to me, it's kind of like that Rock and Ken Shamrock match from WrestleMania 14, where the babyface just couldn't keep his temper in check. He just couldn't. He couldn't just win the match. He just had the heel got under his skin, and that was how the heel was able to keep the title or regain the title in Jericho's case. And I like stuff like that where, you find a way to keep heat on the heel, but still giving the babyface a little bit of his saving face somewhat, but at the same time he reacts like the character probably should, where this guy is such an obnoxious asshole that this guy, of course, he flipped out and tried to kill him. That's what almost any other human being would do in those circumstances. But beyond that point, as far as I can remember, there were no major pay-per-view matches between the two. But the feud did continue. Dean would interfere in a Rey Mysterio-Chris Jericho match, I believe, at the next pay-per-view. And then at Road Wild, Dean was the special guest referee at the Cruiserweight title match between Juventud Guerrera and Chris Jericho. And Juvi would ultimately win that match. And that was kind of the end of the feud. Because I think shortly after that, Jericho went into his whole mocking Goldberg thing, which was also great. Another great thing for Jericho. So this feud accomplished a lot in terms of making Dean more interesting. Jericho, like I said, really came to life as a character through this whole thing, and it made the Cruiserweight Championship an important part of the show for something other than the action, because that's normally what you would watch Cruiserweight matches for. But here you wanted to see this heel get his ass kicked, and that was what made it work. And they didn't humiliate Jericho every week. They didn't make him getting beat a regular thing. So when you get to those moments like Dean taking the mask off and showing it's like, oh, I'm going to kick your ass now, stuff like that, it really makes it mean more. And it's storytelling principles like that I wish modern day wrestling companies would apply a little bit more frequently, and mainly WWE. And very enjoyable series of matches, very enjoyable feud, one of the better feuds of '98. Of course, and that's saying a lot, because this, 1998 was the year we got Austin McMahon, and this was one of the more enjoyable feuds after that. So, a lot of great stuff here. I really enjoyed all their pay-per-view encounters for one reason or another. The Battle Royal at Slamboree, you got the major pop of Dean Malenko's return, which was awesome. The uncensored match, you got the heel winning clean, which was great and necessary to continue the story. And then at the Great American Bash, you kind of got the burn off with the babyface finally beating the crap out of him, but at a price. He loses the Cruiserweight title in the process. But, just a lot of great stuff here. And like I said, I highly recommend checking out all three of those pay-per-view moments and all the promos associated with it, because Jericho's promos throughout this were great and just very funny and really showed what he was capable of as a talent. And it really makes you look back on it and go, man, WCW really dropped the ball with that guy. He should have been a major player for them moving forward. But, that concludes my classic match review. Hope you all enjoyed it. And, man, Jericho Malenko, man, it's one of my, a lot of fond memories. It's one of my favorite things that WCW ever did. So, for those of you that said that WCW never did anything good and, there's not as much value in WCW history as there are other companies, I point to Jericho and Malenko as something worth checking out and something worth remembering. So, like I said, that is all I have for now. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I will see you all later.